Hi there, and welcome to the arcade. You know, when I was a kid playing video games, I didn't start out with PlayStation, Sega, or Nintendo. I did get some of those systems later in life, but in the early days, my siblings and I would play DOS games on the family PC. My dad would occasionally bring home a new game on a floppy disk from work, stick it in the computer at home, and let us play to our heart's content. And usually when people think of DOS games, they think of Doom, or Civilization, or XCOM, Fallout, or Monkey Island, other great games like that. And that's probably because those games were the successful foundations for franchises that still get entries to this day. And while I have gone back and played some of those titles as an adult, I didn't have any of those games as a kid. And since I didn't know any better, I never minded at all. In fact, I think the games that I did have left me with some of the most unique memories and experiences, which I believe helped shape me into the type of gamer that I am today. So today, let's talk about some DOS games, but probably not the ones you remember, just the ones that me and my 8 siblings do. Still one of my favorite games to this day, One Must Fall is a classic fighting game from 1994 featuring giant robots, known as Human-Assisted Robots, or HARs, piloted by unique individual human characters that all have their own strengths and weaknesses. Any pilot can control any of the different HARs, making for a ton of different combinations and ways to play. And the HARs all have their own unique abilities as well. My favorite was always the Katana, the one that had blades for hands and could do the spinning uppercut move that my brother hated so much. This game was so immersive for me back in the day, particularly because of the presentation, the sound, and the music. The characters all say stuff to each other before each fight, and then at the end of each fight an announcer talks about how the fight went. The robots make awesome sounds when they strike each other and perform their special moves. And the theme song of this game still blows me away to this day. I consider this game a masterpiece, and while for most of my childhood we only had the shareware demo, I still put countless hours into this game and still treasure all my memories of playing this game with my family and my best friend. Looking back now, it's easy to see how blatant of a Mario Kart clone this game is. Yeah, not good. But back then, Scunny Kart was the only kart racer in existence as far as I was concerned. And it was fun as heck. All of the Super Mario Kart staples are here. A unique roster of racers, a variety of track types, items, shortcuts, and track obstacles made this a wacky and fun way to race with all the most beloved characters from the Scunny games. Well, that didn't sound right. No one remembers the Scunny games. But hey, it was a fun game for a couple of 8-year-olds back then. And while I definitely don't think it's aged very well, I'll still look back fondly on this one for years to come. Do you remember the first boss you ever beat in a video game? It took some thought for me, some brain racking, but I think I finally figured it out. It was this freak from Biomenace. Can you imagine how scary this thing was for an 8 or 9-year-old to face? I would mostly make my brother try to fight him if I ever even got this far in the game, which honestly didn't even happen that often. But can you really blame me? But my childhood fears aside, this is actually a really good game. It's a solid run-and-gun type shooter with as much vertical scrolling as horizontal. And it looks surprisingly great for being released in 1993. It has cool guns, fun power-ups, and a solid sound design that made this stand out as one of my personal favorites. I remember when I finally beat this game for the first time too, and just feeling that overwhelming sense of accomplishment, like I'd conquered something that I never thought possible before. Another one of my personal favorite DOS games were the Commander Keen games. There were more than a few of them, all with a different story and different locations and enemies. But they all have that addicting side-scrolling gameplay that I've always loved ever since picking this up back in the day. Some of the games have an overworld where you navigate around a larger map to select the different individual levels. I always liked that too because it tied a lot of the different elements together and let you more easily replay levels if you wanted to go back for stuff. And I always liked that the main character was a kid because it just fit really well into the game world. Like, this is the type of stuff kids would imagine, bouncing a pogo stick on the head of crazy bird enemies. No, but really, these games are an extremely fun mix of puzzling, platforming, and exploring, and while I think the series peaked probably at the second or third entry, they are still all pretty fun to me. Star Wars and video games go together like peanut butter and chocolate, and I ate up so much Rebel Assault as a kid. At one point, my dad actually bought a joystick for playing these games just like you would have in the arcade, and my brother and I were straight up addicted. Controlling these iconic ships from Star Wars and blasting bad guys was already so much fun, and that simple little joystick just made the whole experience that much more immersive. The stories of these games don't follow any of the movies. They had their own hero and his own missions to go on, but you do get to see a ton of the same enemies, ships, and iconic locations from the original Star Wars trilogy. After replaying these games as an adult, it's plain to see why the second one is far superior, not only in terms of smoothness of the gameplay, but the accuracy of the controls. That being said, I remember liking the first one more when I was a kid. I'm just not really sure why. Then again, I do always tend to prefer the firsts of things, not always, but most of the time. Wolf was a game that I didn't really understand when I first played it, and to be honest, I'm not sure if I fully understand it now. There's two modes, a sandbox where you're free to explore, and then a mission-oriented mode to complete certain objectives and scenarios. You have to survive as a wolf in the wilderness, making sure to keep your energy up so you can find water to stay hydrated, and find other animals to hunt so you can avoid going hungry. The game has excellent presentation, and I just remember getting lost for hours exploring the world of this game. But the game is really hard though, as your energy gets drained really quick, and if you waste what energy you have left hunting an animal and it gets away from you, you're pretty much screwed. It's a tough game, but it's definitely a worthwhile experience. It almost has that feeling of a roguelike, where every playthrough is unique, and I feel like this game would benefit from either a sequel or a remaster on modern platforms. Listen, I had no idea Doom was even a game back when I first played Rise of the Triad, Wolfenstein 3D, and Blake Stone. But even after playing Doom for myself years later, I still like those other games a little bit better. I just have more attachment to them. And if their gameplay is similar enough to where it's just a reskin of Doom, then hey, I reserve my right to prefer bad games to good ones. Out of these three though, Wolfenstein 3D is definitely the most well known. But I typically more enjoyed Rise of the Triad. It just had such a unique style. It felt so oppressive and dark. And I specifically remember that it feels more open than Blake Stone or Wolfenstein, with a lot of outside areas and less indoors full of tight hallways. It even had a lot of platforming elements too, which I always thought was a super fun addition to a game like this. It was also a pretty disturbing game for a kid to be playing. There's all kinds of horrific traps, terrifying enemies, and gruesome weapons to wield. And I even remember some of the enemies begging for their lives on their knees before I mercilessly gunned them down anyway, right before taking a sip of my Capri Sun. Blake Stone was basically just the colorful sci-fi version of Wolfenstein, with lots of different weapons, enemies, and levels to explore. It was even made on the Wolfenstein 3D engine. I do love the look and feel of this game, but like I said before, I prefer the outdoors and more open feeling of Rise of the Triad.
There were so many more DOS games that I played as a kid. Duke Nukem 1 and 2, Jazz Jackrabbit, Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure, Jill of the Jungle, Zargon, Billy the Kid Returns, and way too many more to name. I may not have had Mario, but I had Commander Keen. I didn't have Sonic, but I had Duke Nukem and Jill of the Jungle. And all of that to say, DOS games may be mainly forgotten by gamers who bring up retro games these days, but I think it's mainly more the ones that didn't create successful, lasting franchises, as opposed to things like Doom or Civilization or Fallout. But I will always look back on those weird DOS games that me and my siblings played with the fondest of memories. And I'm still grateful to my dad for being such a cool guy to bring home all those games from work on floppy disks for us to play. But what about you? Did you play any DOS games as a kid? Or have you gone back and played DOS games as an adult now? I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions and your favorite DOS game, so please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And thank you so much for watching.